There we go.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Adam Erickson. I am an entrepreneur, a growth hacker, and a business coach. I find a fascination with entrepreneurs around the world and what drives their businesses. Of a hot topic these days in the United States is DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Is it dead? To explore this topic, I have two experts with me. We have Colleen Ghost from Life 2.0, Coaching with Colleen. Colleen is a public speaker and also a private coach who engages with businesses trying to determine how culture, communication, the dynamics of business help drive productivity. We also have Ana Ruiz Morillo of Training to Impact. Training to Impact does training programs for both public and private organizations, teaching them about how to leverage the strengths of diversity to achieve better outcomes and how to avoid the adverse effects of anything that might derail a business or derail an organization from getting to where it needs to be. We're having this conversation because, as I mentioned, it's a hot topic. So just to reset for everyone, DEI right now is just a hot acronym that a lot of people know the acronym, but we want to remind what it stands for. So D, diversity. It's recognizing, valuing different backgrounds, identities, and experiences. Equity, a little bit more difficult to explain in this context, but it's providing the right to support so that everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. And then inclusion, making sure that everyone within a workspace or an organization feels comfortable and the ability to do what they need to do without a hindrance or fear of reprisal. So with these terminologies, again, we could get into a bigger discussion on each and every one, but for the purpose of today, we want to get into how did this come about? And it really emanated from the 1960s, as there was still a lot of disenfranchisement of women, of minorities. And so there were laws enacted in the United States to protect the rights and promote those rights. And the goal of DEI within the society was how do we break down these barriers so that everyone has the right and opportunity and the freedom to push forward and succeed. But for the purposes of this particular podcast today, we're really focusing on what is the impact on business. I am an avowed capitalist. I firmly believe in the profit-making motive of any business, and I firmly believe every business should have a passion, but when it makes decisions, there should be a rationality behind it. And as Colleen and Anna consult with their clients, they go through this process trying to determine, as an organization or a company, what are you attempting to achieve, and how do you leverage the strength of your workforce, the strength of your community in order to do that? Which is why for all of us now in 2025, we've been informed DEI is canceled. Major organizations such as Target, Starbucks, Walmart, Disney, and most importantly right now, the federal government have all said DEI is no longer in our plans. So, as a capitalist, I ask myself a simple question, which is why? And within that question, are you losing customers because you have an internal DEI initiative? Are your sales down because you sponsor a certain group during a certain type of year? Are your internal productivity measures going down because you're dealing with employees of different ages, races, cultures? Lately, we've heard a lot of it's a meritocracy. We will only promote those who earn it, or we'll only hire those that are worthy of it. How do you define that? What benefit of that is to a business? Or, of course, the age-old one, fear. Are we canceling this because the workplace dynamic is uncomfortable? And if so, for whom? So with this is where I want to get into the discussion with both Colleen and Anna because they're out there inside of private and public organizations working around these issues, trying to resolve. And the biggest question I ask both of them, okay, we cancel it. What's the impact? Again, my prism of view. We're a capitalist society. Rational organizations do rational things based on rational decisions. So with that being said, the first question I will ask to Colleen, on this slide, I've thrown up a lot of terms trying to figure out what's the impact if I, as an organization, I, as Target, I announce to the world, I'm canceling all my DEI initiatives internally for all my workforce. I'm canceling all my promotions that target or smell of DEI, and I'm canceling my supplier contracts that are based on that. Colleen, explain to me if I'm going to see an impact on my business.
I think you'll see a tremendous impact on your business. I think more and more organizations are diverse in culture, diverse in races, diverse in thought. And what we found, and this is backed by percentages, by studies, what we found in organizations as a whole, when you've got diverse groups of people, when you've got diverse teams, those are the teams that will bring innovation to the table, will bring great thought process, thought leadership to the table. That without that diversity in teams, we're missing the boat on successful environments. Companies have grown. Target is one of them. Target has grown, and they had a major campaign a couple of years ago on how they were really looking at the community, really wanted to bring companies, small companies, diverse companies, people of color, those people who are companies, they wanted to bring them to the forefront and really wanted to bring them into the Target family. So they did a whole marketing campaign of how they really want to benefit the community and how they want to help small businesses thrive. And that helped with their profits. Target was looked upon as being a really positive employee to work for. Their impact on the community was significant. And now that they're moving away from that in terms of the way they're positioning their company, I think they're going to see tremendous impact in their sales. Their profits are going to be impacted by their 180 view of not really being part of that community anymore. By taking a stance back, I think it's going to truly impact their profits and their growth for years to come.
Well, let me ask you a question on that. Let's take the word productivity. And the workforce dynamics have changed over the years. And today, in most companies, there are certain things you can and cannot say, certain things you can and cannot do for fear of alienation, for fear of an HR infraction. Productivity, if I eliminate DEI, is productivity going up because now we can not worry about what we say and what we do? What is the impact on productivity of a smaller manufacturer if all of a sudden I no longer have to walk on eggshells around people of different cultures, different races? How does that impact?
I think the impact we're going to be seeing in terms of how do we build these relationships. When you think about building relationships, one of the things that comes out of when we have DEI policies is really the around respect, showing respect to other people, understanding and respecting their backgrounds, their cultures, their beliefs. When we have those things in place, we also are able to build inclusive groups, really inclusive teams. People then build that trust and respect. That's like first and foremost. I think one of the things that when you think about being open and honest in groups, like when I work with teams of people, I talk about how do we build open and honest communication. But when you think about that, it comes with building trust and respect. When you can build trust and respect in groups, then open and honest communication can come from that. But again, when you think about respect, there is parameters around what does respect look like? How do I want to be treated? How do I treat other people? How do I respect their backgrounds and beliefs and see that as a benefit, as a plus versus something that I have to navigate around? I mean, that's the thing. I think in big organizations, people start to tend to understand the benefit and value of having people of different thought processes, of different backgrounds, different experiences. That's really where innovation comes from. And but we still have to have boundaries around how we treat each other. There still needs to be respect and trust. But at least we're building, when we can build respect and trust and really honor that, then we can have open communication as well.
So, Anna, let me ask you a question on that because Train to Impact does a lot of business with the Latino community. And again, public organizations as well, health organizations, public schools, et cetera. And I think the default mechanism for a lot of people when they think of a bigger company is it's white. And diversity means I have minorities. But you work with organizations that can be majority Latino. Is DEI within a majority Latino organization a thing? And if so, how does it manifest itself between, again, the different Latino cultures between Mexico and the Dominican Republic, between male and female roles in those societies? What's the impact of now I can just throw that term away, but I'm still a Latino organization?
Thank you so much, Adam, for this opportunity. And hello, everyone. So I have to say that within the Latino community organizations, a lot of nonprofit organizations that Training to Impact work with, DEI is very much a real and alive thing because as Colleen just mentioned, the terms that are covering there, it's not just about the equity component, it's about the diversity and the inclusion piece. And Latinos are all different, and people in every job want to feel included, respected, and valued. We want to know because we want to know that in a place that we work, we feel valued and respected, and that's part of the inclusion component. The diversity is so tangible, even in the mostly Latino organizations, because Latinos are different. Even with the term itself, that some people feel more identified with Latinx or Latine or Latino or Latina or Hispanic. So there is diversity within our own groups. And this is not just necessarily about culture. There is also the LGBTQ, the queer community, that also needs a lot of respect. So overall, the impact of inclusion is huge in all organizations because we open up with your comments about the impact, right, when it comes to profit and all that and power in the private organizations. But at the end of the day, they want variety. They want those wonderful, sharp ideas that come from diversity. A diverse workforce is going to give them that. So I don't see how that can impact them negatively. The fact that they have to pay, because sometimes that's what I hear, that, oh, there is a cost to having this, but there is a higher cost from hiring somebody to do DI training in your organization and making sure you're up to date, doing the things you have to do for staff to feel inclusive and all that. There is a higher cost of not having that because
Well,
you're going to lose
let me
revenue.
ask you a specific question with that.
Mm-hmm.
So recently, in the public view, a lot of things are now being blamed on DEI. That obviously people were promoted that shouldn't have been promoted, these type of things. But again, the name of your company, Training to Impact, for me as an entrepreneur and having run teams of employees before, I know that an employee's productivity is a direct result of their ambition, passion, and training, right? If you don't train someone properly, you can't expect the outcome that you want. So when you work with organizations and deal with employee training, not just understanding of diversity, et cetera, but actual training on how to do something, do you find that it could be anyone of any age, race, color, culture that if they're not trained properly can't perform a job function? Or is it relegated to any specific demographic normally is harder to train? These type of things, as you mentioned, is this incurring a cost of doing it? And so for me as a business, if I say I'm doing away with DEI, I can do away with my training because obviously then I'll only have the best and the brightest doing their roles.
Well, yes, there is actually a cost to that. Like it takes 50 to 60% of the salary of an employee to replace that employee. So having training on the regular basis for your staff to feel that they have all the tools that they need and the skills to do the work, it is very important. And it's there's a cost to the company for, and when they're measuring productivity, they should have that in consideration. That's why it's kind of odd that this is happening at this time. This cancellation of the DEI is almost like a fashionable thing, like what you mentioned. It's like, well, that's what happened, and the federal government is going there, so we are all going there. But it doesn't make sense when we are working with organizations to provide training. It's because they are providing the tools that the staff need for them to perform their work, and not necessarily they're doing it for this, but it's proven that they lose money when the companies lose money when staff quit because they don't, for whatever reason. So if you don't want to invest so much in one end, how can it doesn't compare? It doesn't compare what it costs to bring the training to replacing every staff 50 to 70%. It's a
Well,
huge
yeah,
difference.
let me dive into that because I have on here specifically, Colleen, I had you in mind because I know some of the legal firms and others that you work with. Hiring is not a straightforward process. There's not a huge pool of qualified applicants for every job that's out there. And so I'm wondering, once again, for me as a small business, if I eliminate DI from my thought process, or I eliminate the inclusion aspect, making people that, of diverse cultures feeling wanted in my organization, what is that impact on me being able to hire and be able to train, therefore, and retain employees? Because I know from owning businesses previously, if I spend the money, I hire someone, I train them, and Anna, to your point, all of a sudden they quit, then my cost of replacement is very painful. So, Colleen, within the organizations that you work with, are they viewing, or had they viewed previous to 2025, their DEI initiatives as a strategic or tactical advantage going out and hiring a better workforce that was more engaged?
Well, definitely. They see that as a true advantage because when you think about organizations as a whole, whether they're law firms, whether they're corporate entities, there are not many teams that are out there that are not diverse. I mean, it's really hard for me to see the teams that I've worked with have all been diverse and diverse not only in culture and identity, but also in generations and age. When you think about groups of people, impact of DEI is essential when you think about millennials and Gen Zs. They look for organizations that are diverse, that respect diversity, and really look at inclusion as a priority. So if you're thinking about the workplace of tomorrow, whether they're Gen Zs or mostly Gen Zs, those are the things that are attracted to them. They want to work for organizations that respect and have diversity initiatives, that really look for people who are the right fit for those organizations, whether, regardless of their culture, but they look at that as being, we want to have the best of the best. And that means diversity. That means having people of different thought processes, different identities, and different cultures, because they're going to bring all of that value and the great thoughts you know, that they're going to be able to help the company grow. And then when you think about workplace retention, that's how you retain people when you've got environments that really promote that inclusion and diverse thinking.
Well, Anna, let me follow up with you on this because I know Train to Impact works with Portland Public Schools and other organizations. And for me as an entrepreneur, always thinking, what's that next gen workforce, right, coming up? I have a 16-year-old son. I'm always wondering, is he going to be able to survive in the world as the world is? And the world tends to be diverse, et cetera. What is the dynamic that you're seeing now within the public organizations, either state government or schooling systems? How are these being addressed more towards the workforce development thought mentality, be able to communicate with other races, cultures, genders, these type of things? How has that improved in the past 10 years? And now all of a sudden with DEI saying if a school is doing DEI initiatives, it's being cut off from federal funding. What are you seeing within that set of saying, what's going to happen to the students that are the next gen of consumers, the next gen of product developers, the next gen of employees? What's playing out?
In the schools, there is a lot of push for a diversity because they have diversity within each classroom. And in order for this teachers and staffers to be able to get the information that they need to those students, that's at the end of the day their overarching goal, to get the students to succeed, they need to be able to know how to communicate with those students. They need to be able to know how the whole variety is a whole map, the communication, the giving feedback, they how to praise the student, how to get them motivated, all that diversity is needed in there. They need to know how to work with different cultures. And the students, that's for the staff, the students themselves, it's very important that they all know how to work with other different cultures, different styles, different, because they're growing to be in the workforce later. And they need to know how to be respectful when they communicate, even if it is a direct report or a colleague, or they need to know how to work with other people. So there is no going away from diversity and inclusion
Well,
because it's something that is needed.
that was my trap question for the two of you. That if Gen Z, the newer generation, is already being steeped in understanding different cultures, communicating with different cultures, etc., does an organization actually need an internal DEI initiative, or is it just going to naturally occur as the next generation comes forth? Anna?
That would be fantastic if we don't ever need any kind of any new knowledge, right? No, it's not. We always need to learn. We always need to grow because that is where we are now. We are struggling. I mean, look where we are at, trying to defend why some basic respect is needed, because I'm sorry, that's how I see it when it comes to inclusion and diversity, right? So it is needed. Right now, that's where we're at. What we're going to need in 20 years, then we're going to see what we're going to need in 20 years. We're going to see where we're at. But right now, we need this world, not to say this country, but needs the whole respect and inclusion that comes with the DEI. For every topic, you go to climate change, climate action, you go to work productivity, you work to a higher education institution, they all need to know technology. First, how to embrace all those amazing ideas that different ages, different culture, different growing styles that people bring, because everybody have their own magic, right? So you need that to grow. And then they need to know how to work with each other. They need to know how to work together. And at the end of the day, the impact in the organization, that they're not seeing money go out the door because they don't know how to maintain that magic in the workplace. That's how I see it right now.
So, Colleen, I got a different question for you. organization like Target or Walmart or Disney makes a public announcement. We're canceling DI. Will you no longer shop or buy things from these organizations? Starbucks killed DEI. Will you no longer go into a Starbucks? How does this perception, is there an impact on a company that publicly proclaims, well, we no longer support this movement? Will that affect your purchasing behavior?
It could, absolutely. Because I think that DEI, although some companies, I think Target being one of them, has said, well, they're gonna restructure DEI in terms of how they look at it as an organization. They're gonna focus on inclusion and equity. They're gonna take it apart and gonna focus more on inclusion and not necessarily the other parts of DEI, which that's great, but I think that they have to look at the bigger picture. But to answer your question specifically, yes, it will impact my ability as a consumer. Because I loved when Target did their campaign about bringing in small businesses, especially, areas from Black communities, bringing in their businesses, bringing in just Latino businesses, just as a whole, just bringing in the community and really helping these businesses become successful. To me, that was so awesome. And when they went away from that, yes, it does impact my concern as a consumer because I love organizations that really understand and really promote the community, really promote and want other people to succeed. So yes, that will impact my shopping thoughts in the future. Absolutely.
So Anna, as a follow-up to that, if I'm a retailer and I have a large Hispanic block that um, frequent and buy my goods, when Walmart announces DEI's gone, no longer will the Hispanic bloc vote with their feet and their dollars, or is it, okay, we're still going to go here because of prices and there'll be no sales or profit impact?
Well, that's a great question. So at the end of the day, they can call it whatever they want. If they don't want to call it DEI because that is not what they want to call it right now, at the end of the day, they have to have diversity. I'm not going into the store where I don't find what I need and what I want. And if my culture mostly use this and then I'm looking for, I'm gonna go where I can find it. So these places that are saying we're removing the Hispanic aisle, whatever. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go somewhere else where I can find those products. So hey, I wish that we could be more organized to answer your question where let's say Hispanic is 2%, over 2% growth every year. It's faster growing population in the United States than any other, which sometimes I think that scare people. And that could be some of it. It's, people being afraid behind all this. But the purchasing power of the Hispanic is 3.4 trillion a year. That's huge. So you're going to want to have a piece of that, right? You want a piece of that if you are in the business of making money. So that just means that you need to offer those services, you need to offer those products. If you don't want to call it DEI, call it whatever you want. But at the end of the day, people need to find the resources and the services they need. And if we were more organized, that 3.4 trillion purchasing power, we could say we're not going to purchase there because they're not used in this, whatever. But at the end of the day, I don't think we are there, but where we are is that we're going to go where we find what we need. And that's what they need to keep in mind too.
Well, this now, you mentioned it, call it what you will, and I put an acronym aside. You know, what are the benefits for me as a company, right? So I strip out DEI as an acronym, and I no longer have a DEI initiative or a DEI czar inside my own organization. Colleen, I know you put together some of these studies. Um, can an organization just remove the acronym and go on with business as normal? And how do they measure something, right? How do I know if this is working? Again, I'm coming from a capitalist perspective, an entrepreneur's perspective. If I'm doing something, I'm economically rational. If this is going to damage my business, then I'm probably not going to do it. But if it's going to enhance my business, I should probably keep doing it even if I want to go with the flow. So I think we mentioned earlier about the diversity of teams, and then literally I can't remember the last organization I worked with that it was just everyone that looked like me. Um, so within that, I guess the biggest thing that I get into here is, Anna, going back to the sector that you work in, a big thing went out throughout the federal government saying we will now discontinue all websites in Spanish. And so I was wondering what the beneficial impact that has with, as you mentioned, the 2%, Latino growth in the United States to me trying to govern or to have a community that's growing and thriving, or is it beneficial because now I'll force everyone to speak English?
That is a great question. And let me tell you something that we do in teaching, and something to keep in mind when we're teaching is like, what's our goal, right? What is our main objective? Where are we going? So if a student, let's say at the university turning, oh, they're university students, they should have 100%, everything is spelling 100%. But what your goal there is, you want them to know about, let's say, whatever, it's a social work class and they need to know about that particular topic. There is a spelling error somewhere in there. Is that's the question. Is that about the main goal, or is that about all the boss that go around? So that's how I see it. Removing the Spanish websites and the Spanish material, the Spanish bilingual, not making it required, like in this case. What is your goal? Is your goal, if you're in the health field, having healthy communities? Because how are you going to communicate that to people? How are you going to communicate people the information that they need to have to be ready for climate resiliency, for whatever it is that you're doing, to selling that new product, that new phone, not to mention any brands. So if you're in the business either of caring for one particular set of people or caring to sell a product, you're going to promote it. You're going to put in a way that people can understand it. Otherwise, how are they going to make the decision to purchase that? So it doesn't make any sense at this point. So I don't see how they can remove languages. By the way, the Training to Impact website is bilingual Spanish, and I wish we can do it in more languages. The more, the better.
Well, and the point you just brought up about trying to sell out to communities, again, I don't know of many businesses out there that only have a single demographic, but I do know if I'm trying to sell to the female gender of a certain age, I should probably have that voice in the room, right? That's a logical thing to try to advise me as an older Caucasian male. This is how we communicate. So we have a few minutes left here. And so politics aside, I think this is something that the three of us have discussed, and we want people to kind of think about, right? That again, stripping out politics, where do we go from here in the United States? And I think we all agree, someone should ask themselves, do these affect your workplace, right? Does diversity, equity, inclusion positively or negatively, right? Can you bring it up and say, look, if I remove this, what does that mean? Does it affect your neighborhood or your community? Anna, we just spoke about that community development, that if all of a sudden my government services cannot be translated to those in need, what does that do for overall quality of life? And really, I deal a lot with the federal government. If they cut off grants and programs to diverse businesses, then your supplier pool now just goes back to very large corporations that control pricing, and that's going to have an adverse effect. So this is something that I think we'd like our audience to kind of contemplate, that, okay, does removing an acronym actually solve any issues, for better or for worse? And that's really, we wanted to do this podcast not to cry into our bowls that DEI is now dead, but to say, look, all right, take away the words DEI. What, for me as a capitalist, should I still be doing? So why are we doing the podcast today? you can't eliminate diversity by eliminating an acronym. And for the most part, from Mark Cuban to Tom Peters to other leaders, they all agree that diversity is a strength. It's not a weakness. But it takes training on how to leverage that as a strength, to extract from your assets, your people, your workforce, your community, to make it better. And ultimately, I've done business around the world and especially in the United States. Again, I very rarely know one company who has a singular demographic, and the thing we all agree upon, all money coming in is green. And that technically should be the rational decision of how is this positive or negative in my business? And I think in the coming months, we'll see, do earnings reports come out from Target and Walmart and Starbucks? And is there a dip? And can that be attributable to something? And really the reason why we have Colleen and Anna on here is their organizations work with public and private companies and facilitate communication, facilitate understanding. But it's not just the kumbaya moment. It's not just, we're sitting here in the breeze enjoying the sun. It's all of these organizations want to get better, and they want to be able to quantify it as to being better. And that to me is bringing in the outside influence of Life 2.0 with Colleen or Training to Impact with Anna or a combination of both. How can you maximize the productivity, maximize your profits while dealing with the reality that diversity is here? And the more you do equity and inclusion as part of it, whatever you want to call it, it's a net benefit to what you're doing. So we're excited to do this podcast with you. Again, I highly suggest reaching out to both Colleen and to Anna at the coordinates on the screen. Set up a 20-minute conversation. Say, who else do you work with? How could this benefit us? And let's strip out the acronym, that's fine, but remove the politics and let's look at it through an honest lens of, look, if you're losing profits because you feel you're too diverse, okay, you can justify it. But your next generation workforce is coming from somewhere. If it's coming from the United States or elsewhere, it's going to have to be coordinated to get the maximum benefit. So we look forward to having more of these discussions in the future. We appreciate the time for everyone that's paying attention to this. Colleen, Anna, thank you very much for your participation. I know we could have gone much longer in much of this discussion, but I think for the purposes of, is DEI dead in America? I don't think it can be, just by its nature and the foundation of America based on immigrants. And the fact that we have multiple cultures and multiple age groups and multiple genders, it's something that should be leveraged as a strength and not erased as a perceived weakness. So with that being said, thank you, everyone. And please contact both Anna and Colleen and see how they can help your organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you.